the Overman Warrior Podcast.
Good morning, it's Disclosure Day and we're tracking some unusual patterns. Let's click for the full report. Whoa, look! UFOs and aliens are appearing in the forecast. This changes everything. Stay tuned.
Hi, Rich Hoffman here. So everybody's talking about Disclosure Day. I've been looking forward to that movie for a long time. And as it ended, I had a lot of thoughts about it. And I knew I was going to be interested in the subject matter. But in a lot of ways, I feel like it is a movie that gives permission for the next stage. And as my wife and I were leaving, we were talking about it. And we were talking about all the science fiction that's been out there. Because that was the same... the movie Disclosure Day by Steven Spielberg came out the same day that the SpaceX IPO went public. So it was the hot topic. And as I was being very contemplative, and usually when we go to these things, we take the whole family. Usually if it's a big event movie, I usually bring everybody out. All the grandkids, all the kids, spouses, because I like to share those big moments with them. But this is one that was very personal, this Disclosure Day. Now, you got to remember, I was at the age when Close Encounters of the Third Kind came out. I saw it at the drive-in. So, when people don't even know what drive-in movies are these days, I saw Close Encounters of the Third Kind for the first time at a drive-in. And I love Close Encounters. That particular year, 77, Close Encounters came out, Star Wars came out, and as we were leaving this movie, we were talking about how important science fiction has been, and I brought up SpaceX's IPO because there was no way SpaceX would be SpaceX without science fiction novels. Many of them I've written or read. Elon Musk shares with me a lot of the books, the science fiction books that kind of launched science fiction. Before people thought of science fiction, now they think of Steven Spielberg movies. But science fiction, started with fiction, literature, and those ideas grow into, what you end up seeing, becoming science fact. Disclosure Day, in a lot of ways, could not have come out in a previous time. I think it's very much needed. I am a big believer it's taken years and years and years for Ancient Aliens to kind of become mainstream on the Discovery Channel, History Channel. And it's something people talk about now openly that used to be scoffed at, and people make fun of it and laugh at it. They still do now. But I've always been a Zecharia Sitchin fan as far as his books. I always thought good, solid archaeology. You look at what the data tells you, then you start piecing things together based on what the evidence points to, and it pointed to alien contact and pre-human civilizations, and that's not going to win me any friends with the science community, the Smithsonian crowd, but the facts go where the facts go. And I watched this movie Disclosure Day with a particular reverence as to okay, I just spent 3 years writing a book that explains all the answers that the movie asks. And I knew this day was coming. I've watched it. I've watched the trajectory for a certain point. And I'm a person that does a lot of graphs and data analysis in my life. So you can see kind of where things have been headed. You look at the kind of movies that have been out there. Spielberg said that he watched all the episodes of Skinwalker Ranch, which I think is a remarkable documentary series about UFO encounters out there by Dinosaur National Park. I know the region well. I've camped out there before with my family. I know the Skinwalker Ranch area. I know the ridge very well, where they have a lot of paranormal activity there. And there's definitely some strange occurrences that, when you say strange, you kind of define the world by normies, the people who, based on their common belief of what they can handle by bandwidth, establish your normal society. And things that fall outside that, of course, they're going to scoff at and not be real happy with. And science fiction has, over a long period of time, driven a narrative that you could actually release a film like this in 2026, Disclosure Day, and talk legitimately without being too crazy. It just so happens that the third release of all the UFO files, came out of the Trump administration. They correspond very well with Disclosure Day. A lot of people are wondering if it's coordinated. I don't think Trump. The people that know me and I've talked to that are part of the Trump administration over the last months, I've said, look, this Disclosure movie with Spielberg is going to be a big deal when it comes out in June. So beat him to the punch. Make it a Republican thing. Don't let it be a Democrat thing. And that's what we're going to talk about here. A little bit of my view on it. Disclosure Day, great movie, but we got to talk about a couple things. But I said don't let disclosure of the alien races out there be a Democrat thing. Democrats have been all over it for a long time, and there's a reason why, and I'll get into it. There's a lot. It's not just conspiracy and just throw it into the conspiracy basket. There's a lot of psychology that goes into the same kind of people who are Democrats, who want to use aliens and the thought of them to be advocates for Democrat politics, socialism in this case. There's some interesting debates in this movie where the capitalists are kind of viewed as the government that is putting pressure on locking down the information, the government conspiracy types. They're the Trump administration. Barack Obama apparently was on the set for Disclosure Day several times. Spielberg is his own Democrat, and I think that John Podesta and their occult-driven beliefs about UFO disclosure, they've been pushing for years. We have a lot of Republicans now, Anna Paulina Luna comes to mind, that are pushing for disclosure. A lot of good testimony on Capitol Hill that talks about it, I think, in ways that we've needed to for many years. It's not a joke. It's real. And the implications, and this is something I have spent a lot of time. Like I said, I walked out of that movie, and my wife's like, well, there's a lot of, it's a movie that has a lot of answers to it. A lot of things that need to be talked about that have been out there for a long time. And the things that need to be talked about are not things that people are coming out of the movie talking about. So that's why I do what I do. So there's a lot to talk about, and it's stuff that's been out there for a long time, and it's catching up. And science fiction is meant to bring forth science fact eventually. And the science fiction is that there were settlements on Mars and out in the solar system and larger galaxy and universe, and they've been coming to Earth and seeding Earth with life. I think science fact is catching up to that science fiction. And as I've been saying, one of the reasons I want to see us go to space is I want to see archaeology on the moon. I want to see archaeology on Mars. I want to see archaeology on the moons of Jupiter. And I think you'll find that a lot of the mythology of the early human cultures were formed by seed ideas of civilization that came from outside Earth. And that interaction still goes on to this day. And I think Steven Spielberg is naive. Brilliant film. Wonderful score by John Williams. But I think Steven Spielberg is a naive Democrat type in Hollywood. And clearly the movie is saying, look, the aliens are like the aliens of other cultures. We should be open-armed and open them up and let immigration accept aliens from other planets too, not just from other countries. We need to have an immigration policy that doesn't torture aliens, actually. And they actually had some video in this movie of the Roswell aliens being tortured. And that was supposedly the reason why the disclosure people in the film decided to go and do the disclosure is out of revenge for how poorly the aliens were treated by the military-industrial complex. So there's a lot to unpack there, and it's definitely an interesting issue. But one of the things I think the film needs to be, everybody should go see the movie. I think it's as significant as going to see Close Encounters at the drive-in, like I said. I remember what it was like, and how science fiction has advanced science fact over the years. It brings in funding for science. I love reading about science that's just been discovered. I love archaeologists that dig in the dirt and tell me what they find. I love reading about their PR articles. I love their magazines. I love their books. I read as many of them as I can. I love the facts, but the facts, if you put them all together, point to other influences that have driven civilization. In this movie by Steven Spielberg, Disclosure Day is all his years of thinking about this stuff as an 80-year-old filmmaker. I remember when Steven Spielberg and George Lucas thought that Akira Kurosawa was old at 80, and everybody was amazed that he was still making movies. I think at the time he was 80, he made the movie Ron, and it won some Academy Awards for best foreign film. And he was 80 at the time, and everybody thought that was great. And now here's Steven Spielberg, 79 years old, 80 years old, making what I think is a brilliant film. Well played. I think it was written well. People were ripping on the editing, saying they expect better out of Spielberg. I think the music was wonderful by John Williams. I thought the story was a guy who has loved this topic for 80 years, made a movie about something he really loves, and it comes out in the movie. But to defend it, I think I want to defend it because I think it's important science fiction. It's important for context because there's a lot of normies out there, and I call them normies, not to pick on them, but there's a lot of people who aren't ready to talk about this kind of stuff. They're not ready to think about things outside their normal thought patterns. And this really will challenge them because it's not presented as, whoa, isn't that crazy? It's kind of like, oh, it's a fact, and we're just waiting for everybody else to catch up to it. And that's kind of what you're getting out of the slow drip of the UAP files coming out of the Trump administration. There's no question. And I believed it for many years. I think the ancient aliens thoughts, contemplations have more merit to them than fiction. And I've always liked Eric von Däniken books and certainly Zecharia Sitchin. I think there's more, even though it's speculative science, I think there's more to it than I have good reason to believe that, by the way, and I'll talk about that in more detail. But Disclosure Day covers a couple things I think are very important. One is the MK Ultra techniques, science. So the aliens are so overwhelming in this movie, and the idea of it, and the psychic phenomenon of alien encounters, it really soaks up all the attention. But MK Ultra, I think, is the big star of the show, and how these government scientists, and I've said all along, and I do have a UFO encounter, and I'll talk about it. I think in context of this, it's really important. I blow these things off. Lots of wild and crazy things happen to me and around me, and I don't react to them typically. I don't do panic on any level. When bullets have struck near me, I don't jump. For my life is so close. I'm very much an advocate for, you got to trust the plan, and you're either a part of it or you're working against it. And if God's got a plan and you're in it, you're following the plan that you've been made to fulfill, that bullet's going to miss you. That car accident, if you roll a car 25 times at 125 miles an hour and the wheels, everything flies off the car while it's rolling, and you come out of it with just a little cut on your face, that's because you're part of the plan and you're following your destiny. If you end up decapitated in the process, it was your time. I don't think about things like that too much or worry about stuff too much. So when big things have happened to me, I don't tend to get all weird about it. And that my UFO encounter certainly is one of those that I think a lot of people would be a life-changing circumstance. For me, it was just another day at the office, which I'll deal with. Coming out of Disclosure Day, I realized I really need to talk about that. But my feeling is that the government is much more dangerous than the aliens. But I've always thought that there were ancient alien life forms, and that human cultures have been seeded by them. It's not going to get me in the scientific periodicals, because institutionalized science has said that's crazy, ludicrous even. But the facts are catching up to them, and it's just a matter of time as far as I'm concerned. But one big thing that came out in this movie was the MK Ultra stuff, where they had ancient technology. They had like an ancient relic, probably came from one of the alien crashes they referred to. They have alien tech, and you can hold it, and you can use psychic ability. If you can see a picture of somebody, you can jump into their bodies, like an avatar. So, but they have to have a picture of you to do it. And what was very interesting, and I've preached this to lots of people who are willing to listen. And yes, if you're a weak-minded person, and I would say taking drugs, or music that incites you to be in a particular mood, you can make yourself prone to some of these three-letter agencies that have cracked the code on some of the mind control programs that the CIA has initiated. MK Ultra for one. And I'm definitely a believer that Charlie Manson, the Helter Skelter murders were an experiment started with the L. Ron Hubbard. L. Ron Hubbard was affiliated with Charlie Manson. And Aleister Crowley, Jack Parsons, the Pasadena, California crowd that was definitely in a Thelema Hermetic cult, an offshoot of the Masons that were trying to bring occult practices into fruition. And really, when they started playing with rockets out in the desert, out in New Mexico, is when the Roswell event happened. I've been to Roswell. I've seen all the stuff there is to see about Roswell, the crash site included. Crash sites, plural. I live near Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and I totally think that there were bodies recovered from Roswell that were taken to that site. Wright-Pat. So I don't think it's a crazy conspiracy. It's not something I go around talking about much, because there's a lot of other interesting things to talk about. But in relation to this movie, Disclosure Day, and then all the stuff that's coming out, official government testimony where they found bodies, we know that it's out there. So anyway, these guys in the government types, the aerospace industrial complex, as they refer to it, basically say the government can't be at blame for these things, because Spielberg wants to believe that government can help with this kind of thing and be mediators with the aliens, and that the aliens are just like immigrants coming from Mexico or China. We should be nice to them. They're just coming looking for a better life. And that's kind of the pitch of the movie, which is totally a Democrat thing. Not true at all. Aliens could be extremely hostile. And they could, and you definitely, the government doesn't have a right to keep secret knowledge away from people. The government using that technique can become much more dangerous than the aliens, just because they could abuse their power and demand black budgets, and it's all kinds of bad things that go on with it. But Spielberg's a nice guy, and I think he's very naive, and he's sweet, and that sweetness comes out in this movie. But one thing he does cover is this mind control stuff that the CIA definitely has utilized, and I say that they probably, some of these Trump assassination attempts are signature mind control issues, and they cover that in this movie, where an antagonist can hold the relic, the alien relic, see a picture of the target, and then use that conscious mechanism to jump into their body like a soul would jump into a car, an empty vessel. And that's why I always say people who are prone to drunkenness and drug abuse often surrender their authority over their bodies, and all kinds of demons and crazy things jump into them. Other conscious awarenesses jump into their bodies. So in this CIA experiment stuff, if you look at a picture of somebody and you're holding this alien device, you can get into their mind. You can make them look where you want. You can see things from their perspective. You can feel their feelings. You can gain intelligence on people, and that's done in this movie, which I thought was pretty remarkable. But when people say, "Well, it's got an anti-Christian message," I didn't see that. I think Disclosure Day by Steven Spielberg deals with this idea that God is the God of the entire universe, not just Earth, and not just what we record in the Bible, but everywhere where life was, God is the God of all gods. And that's where you start getting Enoch and the 10 layers of heaven and all this kind of stuff. And Enoch sitting at the right hand of Yahweh. Who is Yahweh? How many gods are there? What's the authority structure? That's why I went out and wrote this book, the Politics of Heaven, so people could understand that disclosure was happening. I knew it was. I knew that the government secrets were coming out. I saw the writing on the wall coming out of COVID, because all the standard practices that were used to hide UFO sightings were used to try and cover up that COVID was created in a lab in Wuhan, China, and unleashes a bioweapon. And Dr. Fauci was involved in gain of function research, which members of our own intelligence community knew all about, and they let it go on. Just like they allow aliens to come and go, and we don't have sovereignty over our airspace over these things, and we don't want to admit it to the public. And we've hid the truth from the public for the same reasons that COVID was hidden from the public, the origins of COVID, and also a lot of other things. And, the writing was on the wall, and I knew it when COVID happened. I saw the lame excuses, and I knew the truth right out of the gate. I knew it was going on because I talked to a lot of people that are in a position to know these things. I knew day one that it was a bioweapon that China probably deliberately released to torpedo our economy during an election year, and it was election tampering on their part. They knew what they were doing. They knew about the gain of function research going on in their country, and it got leaked out of Wuhan on purpose. They say it jumped and did all kinds of things. No, it was manipulated and created as a whole bioweapon, and China clearly knew about it. And the CIA, we have whistleblowers that have been testifying, just like they are UAPs, testifying now, 6 years later, that yes, the CIA covered up what they knew about the Wuhan lab at the time. So when that phony baloney message fell apart, and it just really felt like water through people's fingers as they were trying to hold together this conspiracy, years in the making. Really, essentially what they did is they took advantage of people's trust in authority figures. And that's why science fiction's been slow. If the Disclosure Day had come out back when I went to go see Close Encounters at the movie theater, the big deal back then was, hey, look, there's aliens, and they're like little kids, and they're out running around. They came out of a spaceship and took Richard Dreyfuss away. Disclosure Day would have been way outside the Overton window for mass populations back then. Close Encounters, Star Wars was about all they could handle in science fiction. Okay, let's admit there's a galaxy far, far away and that there's all kinds of alien life forms in it. Okay, let's go watch this movie and have fun. That was kind of all the extent of everybody. This idea of seeding the earth and being the seed of civilization altogether, and all archaeology pointing towards those occurrences, which are those huge blanks in the historic record that we're uncovering now. People weren't ready for it, and it's taken years to get there. It's taken Steven Spielberg an entire career to get there, 80 years of really pouring a lot of himself into these topics. And then lots of books and science fiction and years, and Netflix making it popular, of Ancient Aliens television shows. Legitimized, I think, in ways that people have gradually come to accept it. But in this movie, they have mind control. One of the government people takes over the body completely of somebody close to the main characters, so they can get the inside track and kind of be a spy, and they can actually make them do things and actually make them try to kill the main character. And as that was going on, I'm thinking, well, this This is the assassins that were coming after Trump. This is why they cover it up. It's why they don't have these, public trials where a lot of information gets out over these killers or potential killers. The killer of Charlie Kirk. You don't hear a whole lot about that. Why do you think that is? Because somebody was playing these tricks. A lot of these techniques that the CIA used that was shown in this movie. This isn't new stuff that they shown on the mind control in this movie, Disclosure Day. This has been known since the 60s. But now it's not science fiction anymore. It's pretty much science fact. Anybody who's retired from the CIA, who's close to that stuff, is now writing books about it. They're in their legacy period. They're in their retirement years, so they're talking. Some of them, in some cases, they had kids that are talking because they've died off. So we're learning what the CIA knew and when it knew it and how it knew it. And likely it came about with this interaction with this alien technology, which goes back to all this occult interaction, bringing them into our life through occult practices, which has likely been going on as long as humans have been conscious. Likely a lot of the sacrifices that were done to pagan gods were done trying to appeal to extraterrestrial life forms and getting them to bring some new form of technology or information that would help that region have domination over their rivals. And by having blood sacrifices, you appeal to their spirits. And that's why I think Spielberg is a little naive when he thinks that aliens coming are like immigrants trying to come into the United States, and we should treat them fairly. They're just people too. They're indigenous people from space. Treat them nice. I think Spielberg's highly naive on the topic. And then you can allow a government to just not have any sovereignty over people's bodies is crazy. But they make Disclosure Day, from Steven Spielberg's point of view, makes the case that there are things bigger than us, and we should accept that. And if aliens grab you and molest you, let them do it, because they're nice people. They mean well. Just let them do what they want to do. And then the government shouldn't be involved in any kind of conspiracy with them, because they're the big meanies. Otherwise known as MAGA Republicans. They don't come out and say that. Again, I enjoyed the movie thoroughly. I think every frame of it was fun, enjoyable. I love the story. I love the characters. I love the message. And as I walked out of the theater, I said, wow, I knew this day was coming. And it's just a movie, but it's a movie that brings people through the Overton window to say, you know what, when I'm in a tea party circle with a bunch of people from my church group, I'm not going to say I don't believe in life. I don't believe we're the only place in the universe that has life. I'm not going to say that, because I don't believe that. More than 50% of people believe in extraterrestrial life. That's a recent poll. I think it's higher than that by a lot. And Disclosure Day gives permission to accept that. So everybody who's kind of liked Ancient Aliens and goes off the side and says, what do you think? Well, I would never say that in public, but here's what I think. Those people don't sound so crazy, I don't think, coming out of Disclosure Day. I think Disclosure Day is an important moment. All the revelations coming out of the official government correspond with it. And like I told my wife, I said, well, good thing I spent the last 3 years writing a book about this, because I think people have a need for the answer. There's a lot of questions that are brought up that a lot of, I call normies, not to put them down, but normies, like mind control, is definitely a thing. And when you see a killer, like some of these assassination attempts against Trump, when you see the reporting go cold, that's because you start getting into the weeds and you find out what the psychological profiles of these people. They have memory gaps and influences and dreams and all kinds of things that are popping in their heads that probably aren't originating from their own thoughts. People often think, because they have a need to do it, boy, I don't want anybody to know what I'm really thinking. I want to have sovereignty over my thoughts. If I'm alone in a room, does anybody actually know what I'm doing and thinking? And the answer is, the short answer is, well, God knows. Well, how's God know, and what's God? So that brings up a religious question that never gets answered. So then people are satisfied to sit alone in their places and think, hey, no one knows what I'm doing. But like I've said to lots of people, the CIA a long time ago, they're psychics that develop techniques, and sometimes they can just do it with a picture. Sometimes it might be alien tech, like suggested in Disclosure Day. Alien tech that they can hold in their hand and say, I see a picture of you, now I'm going to climb into your mind and see everything you can see. And I'm going to actually put thoughts in your mind. I'm going to jump into your dreams. I'm going to influence your dreams. People think they have sovereignty over their personal thoughts. And the truth is, the science fact is, your soul is riding in a vessel, a body, and if you're weak, it can be manipulated and thrown aside, and something can take it over. Call it demonic possession if you want to. One thing I think is a very pro-Christian message in this movie is the character that was being manipulated by this government agency through mind control took her crucifix off, and she used her faith in Jesus. She grabbed it so tight that it dug into her hand was bleeding from grabbing into it. Because she was fighting, she knew her body was being taken over, her mind was being taken over by this third party using her body as an avatar, and she wanted to fight it off. And the suggestion in the movie was you could fight it off with faith. Whether God really exists wasn't the issue. The issue was the belief that God exists was enough to help override the government taking over the body, which then you see when you have this secular society that wants to eradicate faith and belief in God and Bible from society at large. The goal is to make people easy to control, because they want to be able to look at a picture of you with a surveillance state and say, hey, I want to jump into so-and-so's mind. I think that they're trouble, or I want to spy on their house, or I want to see their naked wife. So I want to jump in their head and watch them in the bedroom with the wife. You don't think that's going on? You bet it's going on. There's a lot of perverts who work in the three-letter agencies that abuse the tech all the time. Of course they're doing it. And all they got to do is get your video of you from a stop camera at a traffic light and watch you go home and know that you have a good-looking spouse, and they might want to see them naked, so they look at a picture of you on their monitor, and then they use this tech to jump into your mind, and you might be half drunk that night. You may not realize something else is in you. You may have you may feel like you're not quite yourself, like something is sharing the space with you, like another person is in the car with you. You might have your hand on the wheel, but they might be in the driver's seat or the passenger seat in the back seat looking out the same window and watching through your eyes all the things you see. So the scary thing about that is it reveals that you're not alone ever, and that something's always watching you and looking at you, and that we've known this for years, and occult practices reveal it all the time. And I think it's one of the most the most significant things they talked about in Disclosure Day. There's a lot of that psychic activity going on Disclosure Day, which I think is very significant, and it ties directly to the kind of killers that have been going after Trump and killed Charlie Kirk. And yes, the three-letter agencies know how to psychically manipulate people in much the same way. I think they can actually do it without ancient alien technology. I think they can do it with people who have gifted psychic ability, and they can look at a picture and they can go anywhere they want if they have a point of reference. One thing that was very interesting in this movie is they actually recreated the childhood home of the main characters so that it would be easier for them to psychically put themselves in connection with this storyline, the disclosure events. They went to a lot of trouble to perfectly recreate their childhoods so it would evoke memory. So the psychic ability that's well known out there, that's the science fiction part, and it's the technology is actually much more sophisticated than what they showed in the movie. But the fact that they showed that much, I think, is a very revealing attribute. But also that Spielberg took the next step, and he actually showed that the person could fight back against that mind control by holding on to her crucifix so tightly that she drew blood from her hand because it cut her while she was grabbing it so tight, fighting this thing off. I think that that speaks very well for Christianity and faith. So people are coming out of the movie saying it's anti-Christian or it's going to challenge God and Christianity. I think those are not true. I think it was very respectful of Christianity and actually showed how you can fight back against mind control. Most of the time you see people who end up becoming assassins for these projects. I think of the Las Vegas shooter at that concert that time, from the hotel, shooting from the window down into the concert goers. down to the Trump assassination attempts, and then Charlie Kirk's assassin. They all have something in common, and even school shooters. What they all have in common is they're kind of loners, they're kind of empty vessels, and if someone has the ability to psychically climb into their head and make them do things, they're going to do it. They might say, the devil made me do it, the devil will whisper in my ear. Well, the devil can be a lot of things, and Satan in the Bible, as recorded over time, even whispered in the ear of Yahweh. So you know that this is a thing, and when you study these events, you know how to caution yourself from them. But in the movie Disclosure Day, the suggestion was, hey, if you have great faith in Christianity, you can fight this thing off. And that's how this lady in the movie was able to break the spell, is her faith in Christianity. And she had been a nun in training, and she called one of her sisters, a senior leader. She called her on the phone and talked to her. I thought it was a really good scene. I thought how it was executed and drew out. One person was in a diner talking. The other person was at a church talking. And the way the dialogue went together and the events as they were occurring and the subject matter of the conversation was astonishingly well done. Definitely a master filmmaker in Steven Spielberg to put something like that together in such a way. It was just very well done, very well executed scene. Great acting, great execution by all the film tech crew. But the plot line itself was very respectful of Christian faith. And it was one of the key messages of the movie. It definitely wasn't an anti-Christian message. And that's something that I think everybody should go see. Disclosure Day. My reaction to it was a really good movie. It definitely moves the needle forward. I think it gives permission. I've known for years, when I started writing my book, The Politics of Heaven, I knew that the bar graph was taking us to a disclosure point where government was going to release what it knew, and then you had to have science fiction writers cover the gap. This leaves people going out to dinner after the movie saying, you know what? Honey, what do you think? Yeah, when I was a kid, I did see a UFO. Yeah, I like E.T., and I hope E.T. actually is real and comes back. Yeah, I do have a lot of paranormal observations in my life that I didn't tell you about when we were dating because I let you think I was stupid. Yeah, there's a lot of that in my life, and let's talk about it, because I think Disclosure Day gives people permission to say, yeah, okay, let's have a serious conversation and not just blow it off as conspiracy, like everybody did with COVID. Let's have a serious conversation about it, and Disclosure Day invites that serious discussion, which I think is the important point. But like I said to my wife, I said, wow, there's a lot of questions people are going to have coming out of this movie. Probably a good thing I spent the last 3 years writing a book answering those questions. I didn't even know Spielberg was making that movie. I mean, I think I found out a year and a half ago or so, but I already started my book, and I didn't know where he was going to go with it. But essentially, all the questions that got left open were chapters in this book of mine that I wrote purposely knowing that people were going to want to have some sort of religious concurrence. People who haven't read the Bible once yet, but maybe need to read it 4 or 5 times to have a good understanding of it, and maybe go to Sunday school for most of their childhoods, like I did, and go to church many, many Sundays and think about religion a lot in their adult life, and then have a full, mature, respectful understanding of it. What kind of questions are they going to have when we find out that aliens have been seeding planet Earth for many millions of years? That's going to be, I don't know about shocking or jarring. I don't know if it's going to be I think human beings are much more resilient than what we're given credit for, and no 3-letter agency should have complete authority to hide secrets from us. If there are aliens in our airspace, we need to get it under control. And the facts are we don't have it under control, and we're allowing open borders to happen, and we can't allow it to happen. And it doesn't matter if they're coming from Mexico, Honduras, Venezuela, or China, or North Korea. Aliens are aliens, and you can't let them in your sovereign territory. And even if they're coming from some galaxy many distances away from a time long in the past, and they're just arriving here now, and they have this great technology and all kinds of cool information. That doesn't mean you put up with it. You still have to maintain your sovereignty, and we put government, elected government, in charge to make sure it's not that the president needs to know from somebody who has superior knowledge to us. They have to honor the person we put in the White House, and the president needs to know if we want to know. So there shouldn't be any president needs to know. These presidents on a need-to-know basis, and that we're going to ask for endless black budgets to keep secrets from the American people so that we can tell them we're protecting them from things they don't even know about. That's not how it flies. But Disclosure Day is a great movie. It advances the dialogue in ways I think is healthy for society, and I highly recommend it. And it's very respectful of Christian faith, very respectful. And I'm surprised people haven't been talking about it coming out of the theater. Reviewers haven't really addressed it, and I think it's one of the biggest scenes in the movie. But Disclosure Day is great stuff and worth going to see, and it's definitely something to talk about for months and weeks and months thereafter. It's going to definitely advance human culture in ways that science fiction has been trying to do for over 100 years, going back to Jules Verne, or From the Earth to the Moon, and H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds. A lot to talk about there. Disclosure Day is a great movie. Definitely go see it. Steven Spielberg, I want to say he's at his best. I say he's at the best of being a professional Hollywood filmmaker with all the tools that it takes to be one. Is it like Close Encounters or E.T. or Raiders of the Lost Ark? Is it like, I think, probably his best movie, Schindler's List? Is it like jaw-dropping like Jurassic Park? I think it's in there. I think it's so full of stuff that people aren't ready to deal with that they came out of it kind of numb, and they have to think about it. And one of the things they're going to be thinking about was the positive reverence to Christian faith that it articulated very respectfully. And I think it's a good message on how to control people who are trying to put you through mind control. If you have a strong faith or strong personal beliefs, you're likely going to be able to fight off those attempts. They covered that in this movie, and I think that was phenomenal. I really enjoyed the movie. But again, I wrote a book that answered a lot of questions that they brought up. So I left the movie theater as the lights came back on and the credits had been done. I stayed till the last one rolled by. I waited for all the lights to come up, and then I left. I was definitely the last one to leave. And as I was leaving, I thought, wow, I'm glad that movie was made, because it addressed all the things I wrote about that I thought a lot of people are going to think it's crazy to even talk about in a mainstream way, because I present The Politics of Heaven as a mainstream book, not some conspiracy book. And it really set the stage for that to be a mainstream type of literary work. And I'm pretty happy about that. People want disclosure, and they want to validate their personal observations. And a lot of people have had paranormal experiences, and they don't want to feel like they're crazy to bring them up. Just like people thought they were crazy to bring up that COVID was created in a Wuhan lab through gain-of-function technology and released by China as a bioweapon to destroy the Trump economy in an election year. That's a little bit too much for people to believe, so they'd rather not hear it. And it's a lot of the cases with alien interactions with civilization. But the science has proven that to be the case, and science fiction is helping give people a bridge to get there. And that's certainly what Disclosure Day is all about. Wonderful movie. Anyway, Rich Hoffman here. Share, subscribe, make tomorrow a better day. If you haven't read my book, The Gunfighter's Guide to Business, I think you'll love it. Anyway, have a good day. See you later.
In the age of disclosure, you must understand the politics of heaven. Coming soon.
Coming soon, The Politics of Heaven in 2027. A treasure hunt through heaven and all human history.